The continent of Terranora is entirely different from Earth. Legend has it that when the heart of a king burned, a being beyond the fate of the world descended upon this land. Emperor Lestenad sacrificed his 5 sons, 7 daughters, and 19 close royal relatives to summon a saint from another world. However, upon seeing the saint from another world, Lestenad was extremely frustrated as he had spent much time but only managed to summon a young man from Earth. In Lestenadium Castle, the king loudly summoned a gigantic monster. A mag with icy eyes slashed deeply with his sword, felling the monster instantly. Lestenad, gritting his teeth, did not anticipate the monster being defeated so swiftly. Sung Sihan calmly approached him, stating that the monster meant nothing to him, as he was also a summoned being from another world. The ability to summon entities from another realm is a type of magic passed down within the Lestenadium. This ability has caused many of the king's subjects to die in agony due to his tyranny. Sung Sihan intended to make Lestenad experience hell. Lestenad, underestimating Sung Sihan and discarding him, was unaware that Sung Sihan had escaped from prison, endured torturous pain, and finally stood before Lestenad to exact revenge. Shouting in delight, Sung Sihan proclaimed that Emperor Lestenad's reign would end. Wrath surged through Sung Sihan like a tidal wave, casting a deadly bolt at him. Emperor Lestenad, with eyes gleaming fiercely, cursed loudly, pondering the deadly prophecy that had led him to this fate before being struck down by Sung Sihan's sword. Watching Lestenad collapse in a pool of blood, Sung Sihan sighed, relieved it was over. Hearing footsteps approaching, Sung Sihan turned joyously to call out to Lavina. Lavina congratulated him on his victory over the emperor, acknowledging the difficult battle. Embracing Lavina tenderly, Sung Sihan remarked that it was finally over, and he might not have to worry anymore, hoping to make Lavina happy forever. However, Lilstein's voice suggesting that it wasn't over yet startled Sung Sihan. Lilstein declared that they must burn Lestenad's heart to eradicate any remaining remnants. A tall man standing near Lilstein, appearing curious, speculated whether burning Lestenad's heart might also cause Sung Sihan to disappear. Lilstein denied that, explaining that Sung Sihan had been summoned here through the heart of the royal lineage, not specifically through Lestenad. Sung Sihan, with a firm nod in response to Lavina's question about whether he intended to return home, considered his teammates who had fought alongside him, his close friends, and the beautiful girl he loved deeply and had decided to choose. He sighed and told Lavina that while he would be lying if he said he didn't miss Earth, he did not regret coming to this world because everything important to him was here. Once again, he reaffirmed his decision in response to Lilstein's words. Suddenly, Lavina moved closer and kissed Sung Sihan on the lips, shocking him. Calling out Lavina's name in disbelief, he heard her speak with a tone as if everything was troublesome, making him doubt his ears. Frozen in place as he watched the activation of a spatial gate, he couldn't even shout a warning to everyone to be careful before he saw their figures fading and then disappearing completely. Realizing that it involved the king's heart, Sung Sihan could not believe what was happening right in front of him and with his own comrades. Lilstein slowly explained that even if all those of the Lusclan lineage died, if they tried to connect with the king's heart powder, opening a spatial gate would still be impossible. With an unprecedented coldness in her expression, Lilstein thought that Sung Sihan had become too powerful, and along with that, his other comrades also invited him for his fame and beloved status. They did not need another ruler if Sung Sihan became one. In summary, they were grateful to Sung Sihan, but he would have to return to his world. They would not let the empire fall into the hands of an outsider like him. Lestenad had panicked, pretending not to understand anything. He turned pleadingly to Lavina, but only received a cold, dismissive smile from her. She had her own agenda. She wanted to be queen, not just a king's wife. Despite Lestenad's screams, Lavina said something akin to a goodbye and then pushed him into an endless vortex. His screams gradually became colder and then disappeared completely, and the world was saved by a savior with 6 heroes. And that savior returned according to his wish. Lilstein stood preaching before countless people about how the dictatorship had ended, and the 6 heroes, also the 6 people with him, had promised the people that they would build this empire. The oppressive tax rates had been abolished, freeing the people from coercion. The 6 kingdoms, situated close to each other, governed the continent, heralding an era of prosperity. The sky was clear, with tall trees densely shading the landscape. The girl with light blonde hair strolled leisurely, singing softly as she walked. She exclaimed how beautiful the sky was without any fog clouds, making it a perfect day for farming. Crouching in a garden of tender green vegetables, she delicately and gently dug with her hoe into the vegetable beds. Suddenly, a slight noise startled her, and as she looked up, she seemed to notice something whimpering nearby, curiously peeking over. Surprised to see a fish with a brown, ugly body flapping on the ground, she quickly picked it up, recognizing it as a flounder that looked very appetizing. Despite her craving for the fish, she realized she couldn't eat it without knowing its origin. It was suspicious for it to appear in the middle of the forest, so she threw the dying fish back to where she found it, deciding to ignore it and return to her work. A loud explosion erupted, sending dirt flying everywhere at the spot where she had just been standing. Startled, she turned around, stammering, unsure of what was happening. Towering in front of her this time was a large, fat pig that had flattened the ground. Unable to comprehend what was happening with the earth and sky, she looked up, her eyes wide as if they were about to fall out. Adding to this the loud scream of Sung Sihan rushing towards her, naked. Her eyes looked as if a huge planet had just exploded beneath the earth. Helplessly watching the scene unfold after the pig, it turned out she would witness a man face-planting into the ground. She asked as if checking whether Sung Sihan was dead yet. Suddenly, he jerked his head up, causing her to stiffen a bit. The sky remained clear over the village, and the girl decided to greet Shy. But somehow, his eyes looked as if they could bite anyone nearby, fierce and snarling. Sung Sihan continued to talk to himself, seemingly unable to contain some joy, something he had accomplished after many years. He shouted an expletive, indicating Sung Sihan was back, but then he face-planted into the ground again. The scene in front of her made the girl holding her gardening tool stand there, witnessing Sung Sihan acting like a madman performing a comedy. That evening, Sung Sihan woke up in a small house, confused about his whereabouts. A soft voice asked if he was awake and mentioned she had made some thick porridge for him to nourish his body. Noticing he still seemed uneasy, a girl asked if he was alright, expressing her surprise at seeing someone fall from the sky for the first time. Half sitting up, Sung Sihan intended to ask if she was the one who had saved him. However, before he could finish his sentence, he felt pains from his bones that made him irritable. The girl seemed to notice the language barrier was she, guessing he might not be from Terranora. After a bit of shouting and confusion, Sung Sihan realized he had been speaking the wrong language and asked again if she had saved him. The girl confirmed she had. Seeing Sung Sihan completely unfamiliar with his surroundings, the girl quickly explained that he was in the northern part of the Defilan Mountains. Seeing his continued confusion, she further clarified that this was the Kingdom of Lai, a country established after a hero's revolution. Sung Sihan laughed out loud as if he found the situation absurd. Suddenly, his expression turned dangerous when he mentioned that Lilstein had become a king. The girl beside him was completely clueless about the situation. Suddenly, Sung Sihan looked at her and asked to borrow some clothes. After eating several bowls of rice, which he commented had a fishy smell and used spices rare in this place, he seemed to become more alert. Sung Sihan thanked the girl for the meal, but at that moment, she was quietly observing Shi, thinking he was very handsome with a perfect body, and she suspected he might be of royal descent. Finally, Sung Sihan asked who she was. The girl said her name was Alita, and she was just a village girl. Sung Sihan appeared slightly surprised, but his comment on her strong physical build made Alita skeptical about that. Alita admitted she was a master of swordsmanship and a freelance worker, not serving any king. However, her expression darkened when Sung Sihan asked if she had any connection to the Lustenant family. Swift as lightning, a sword thrust forward, splitting the table Sung Sihan was sitting at in half, making him shout. Alita was about to leap over the table to execute him, but she froze when she found he was no longer there. Suddenly, Sung Sihan appeared behind her, calmly stating he wasn't there to fight. Alita, slightly angered, charged at Sung Sihan, but he swiftly dodged, causing her to doubt his identity. As Sung Sihan dodged Alita's attacks, he tried to calm her down. Alita thought to herself how strong he was, telling herself she needed to speed up her attacks. Sung Sihan, with a smirk, told Alita she was not as calm as she appeared to be. Blocking her knife with a wooden spoon, Sung Sihan knew she didn't intend to kill him. Alita was startled when Sung Sihan parried her move with the spoon, and before she could regain her bearings, she was pushed back. Breathing heavily, Alita admitted defeat and asked for his name. Sung Sihan introduced himself at a moderate pace, stating that he came from Earth. Alita was taken aback, realizing he was the savior from another world. Sung Sihan smiled, satisfied that he hadn't been forgotten, but he felt hurt by Alita's actions. He only wanted to inquire about her relationship with Lustenant. After a moment of hesitation, Alita finally confessed her full name. She bore the Lusklin family name and was indeed the daughter of Lustenant. The crowd declared that the era of the Mad Emperor had ended, proclaiming that all those of the same bloodline as the Mad Emperor must be killed to prevent another tyrant from arising. In the palace, a wounded woman apologized to Karen, saying he was the only person she could trust. Karen, a knight, addressed her as Serafina, while a little girl, sobbing uncontrollably, clung to her. Karen swore to protect the child beside Serafina with all his honor and strength. The girl's face showed fear and despair. As time passed, Karen, a loyal bodyguard, took excellent care of the girl. He devoted himself to raising her in a remote location and taught her how to fight. However, Karen was essentially working as an unpaid servant, since he had accidentally learned her identity and had to take her out of the kingdom. At that moment, Karen was sitting on the ground covered in wounds. From then on, they lived in isolation, except when they visited a nearby town to take on jobs when they ran out of money. He understood why she lived in seclusion. He was surprised to learn that she was the daughter of the Mad Emperor and wondered if he was an enemy of her father, but she no longer cared about the Mad Emperor. Although the Mad Emperor was dead, people still feared the emergence of another tyrant. People linked to the Mad Emperor could open gates to other worlds, which was why they were being hunted. She thought he was one of them. He frowned, questioning if she had been too lazy to convince him otherwise and had chosen to lie, remarking on the irony but not finishing his thought. The more he learned about what had happened, the more uncomfortable he felt. He then sighed, saying he understood they were facing difficulties, but they should cheer up, as there were people who had accidentally been transported to this world just like him, and compared to them, people like him were doing quite well. Then she raised her concern about whether he really was the savior of the other world, as she had heard that after Sihan defeated the Mad Emperor, he had returned to Earth, and how could he have come back to the continent of Terranora? Continuing the conversation, Sihan turned pale and his grip on his cup tightened so much that it cracked when she asked how he could return in such a naked state. He abruptly stood up and yelled an explanation that he couldn't control being naked because only living beings could pass through dimensions, asserting it wasn't a bizarre preference of his. He shared that he had to be naked both times he traveled, including his embarrassing reappearance on Earth at the crowded Woman intersection, which still made him uncomfortable just thinking about it. She didn't understand what Woman was. Then she asked him if it meant that 10 years ago he had returned to Earth and then somehow came back to Terranora because of someone's doing, expressing disbelief that someone had summoned a person from another world. He pondered and said if he had to blame someone, it would be himself because he had chosen to return here. Surprised, she exclaimed how that could be possible. He casually replied that it was possible, but not easy since it had taken him 10 years, contemplating how to explain to her that he had summoned himself. Suddenly, he seemed to realize something. Seeing his reaction, she asked what was on his mind. He called her name, Alita. He inquired if she was being pursued because she carried the royal Lusclan blood, a family with the power to summon beings from other worlds, and she confirmed it. His face darkened as he cursed, wondering if he had made a mistake. Confused, Alita looked at him as he explained that to travel safely to Terranora from Earth, one needed a magic spatial coordinate. Therefore, he had used people of Lusclan lineage as coordinates, those who possessed the power to summon beings from other worlds, and Alita, being of the purest Lusclan bloodline. Realizing this, Alita thought back to why he had asked about her relation to the Mad Emperor. He continued explaining that, in other words, he had used her to enter this world. He asked her if this meant that to other sorcerers, it seemed as if she had summoned him with a summoning spell, to which she too appeared bewildered upon hearing. She muttered to herself about the impossibility of summoning magic and denied that it could be true. Alita then stood up abruptly and looked out the window in shock. Seeing the glimmers in the dark forest, she exclaimed in dismay about how this could be, wondering since when the surroundings had been like this. The flickering lights were torches lit by soldiers outside. They had surrounded the small house deep in the forest for some time now. An old man among them noted traces of summoning magic in the area, confident that the reactions came from that small house, indicating they had completed the encirclement. General Xenon, a relatively young-looking soldier with a stern face, thanked the old man, a mage named Clan, for his efforts. He authoritatively commanded everyone to be ready for battle, to stand by while surrounding the house. Inside, Sihan was surprisingly impressed with Alita's readiness for combat, silently noting she seemed accustomed to facing crisis. He felt guilty because his arrival, driven by his whims, had now endangered her after she had successfully hidden for so long. His face paled with fear at the thought of Alita blaming him for their discovery, questioning why he had summoned himself when no one had asked him to. He was quite sure, although it wasn't outwardly visible, that she was very angry. Awkwardly, he called her name and said she should feel free to speak her mind. Contrary to his expectations, instead of reproaching him, she bowed her head and thanked him for warning her about the impending attack, leaving him stunned. Outside, the aggressors began their threats, calling her a criminal and demanding she show herself, or they would blow up the house. General Xenon ordered the mage clan to execute a strike to intimidate them. Obeying, the old mage immediately launched a powerful spell directly at the house, igniting a massive fire that engulfed it, which even surprised General Xenon. He jumped, shouting at the old mage if that wasn't a bit excessive, since they had orders to capture Alita alive. The old mage nonchalantly laughed, assuring that the technique looked terrifying but was not lethal to Alita. He added that if it were unfortunate, she might get scorched, noting the fire was so fierce that even the soldiers dared not approach. From within the flames, Alita emerged unscathed, prompting shouts from the crowd that she had escaped and promising a reward of 10 gold coins for her capture alive. Unfazed, she single-handedly faced the mob with her sword. Each swing sent blood flying tens of meters, terrifying her assailants who denied the reality before them, wondering if she was a master swordsman. Alita, however, was concerned about being outnumbered and pondered her escape. Just then, she sensed something. A massive strike came down, but fortunately, she quickly sidestepped it. Xenon, holding his sword, condemned the cursed Lusclan bloodline, questioning how a master swordsman could stoop to killing a mere soldier, and asked if she felt no shame. He unleashed his power, declaring that he, Xenon, a knight of Lilstein, would handle Alita himself. She sensed the danger. Xenon's armor was also powered, and he was a level above her. Xenon swung his sword at her, aiming directly at her neck, but she leaned back to dodge. He struck again and she ducked. Finally, spotting an opportunity, she firmly gripped her sword, but a powerful surge from him countered her strike. Xenon mocked the strength of her swordsmanship, admitting it was strong, but not as strong as his defense. He belittled her efforts, saying her tricks were futile. This time, when he attacked, she could not dodge and instead met his sword directly, struggling. Unable to withstand the power, she spat out blood and was thrown back, the ground cracking under the impact, sending dust and debris flying. Her blood splattered on Xenon's face, causing him to pause and wipe it off disgustedly, commenting on the filth. Facing a wounded Alita, Xenon stated that if she was indeed a master swordsman, she must realize she could not defeat him unless she surrendered her weapon. Before he could finish his sentence, Alita unexpectedly surrendered. Surprised yet responsive, he commended her quick judgment, stating it was a wise decision and instructed her to follow him. However, he then noticed someone else nearby. It was Sihan, who commented on Xenon's fervent fighting style, questioning if his calmness stemmed from pity for Alita, remarking on how quickly his emotions had changed. Seeing Sihan, Xenon's expression darkened and he internally questioned who Sihan was and why he hadn't sensed his approach until he was almost upon them. Xenon was stunned as he looked at Sihan, silently wondering who he was as he had not sensed any presence when Sihan approached. Xenon grimly questioned Sihan about his identity. He pointed his sword at Sihan's back, but Sihan, seemingly unfazed, apologized and explained that he meant no harm to him, but had some responsibilities to uphold. Turning around to Xenon's surprise, Sihan then sent both him and his sword flying into the air, landing with a great thud that raised a cloud of dust. As the dust settled, Xenon was found with his head buried in the ground and his legs sticking up. The soldiers trembled in fear as they witnessed their general being subdued this way. Alita, puzzled, watched Sihan and wondered why he was opposing these soldiers, considering if Sihan was indeed Sung Sihan, then these men were the subordinates of his former comrades. The old wizard among the soldiers loudly declared Sihan to be a remnant of the evil empire and ordered the soldiers to deal with him quickly. Despite the soldiers charging at him, Sihan did not show fear, but instead casually put his hands in his pockets and remarked that they would not falter even though their leader had been defeated. It seemed he had no choice but to fight, though he wished otherwise, and as he struck each soldier, he continued to apologize and asked them not to blame him. Each soldier tasted the ground, yet Sihan still asked them not to hold a grudge against him. As he fought, he kept apologizing, but the witnessing soldiers shivered at his strength, internally questioning why he apologized if he intended to thrash them. At this moment, Xenon managed to get up from the ground, about to curse at whoever dared when he was left speechless by the scene before him. In front of him, soldiers and his comrades were half buried in the ground, with those unlucky like the general having their heads down and legs up, while others were stuck with their lower halves unable to escape. Xenon could hardly believe it, thinking how a mere mortal without any weapons had managed to subdue all the soldiers here. Realizing this was the situation he had also been in, he suddenly thought of something else. He screamed that these movements were familiar, recalling the silhouette of a young man clad in armor with a red cape billowing behind him, looking every bit a hero. Even without seeing his face clearly, one could tell he was smiling. In the present, Sihan saw that Xenon had awakened and remarked that he was quite tough. Xenon, turning pale, listened as Sihan spoke, causing him to faint again momentarily. As Sihan was about to hit him again, Xenon spoke up, asking him to wait as he had a question, but before he could finish, Sihan's strike landed, and the scene of General Xenon being planted like a banana tree was recreated. After delivering the blow, Sihan turned around and reiterated that he had said this over and over, but he held no ill will towards anyone there. Around him were the unfortunate soldiers subdued on the ground and partially buried, yet Sihan casually stated that they had no reason to continue fighting. The only one still standing was the old wizard, who boldly said if they wanted to continue to resist, he was ready to oblige, to which the wizard could only grunt in resignation. He glanced around the battlefield, realizing that the elite warriors and wizards were no match, and wondered where the master swordsman, the monster, had come from. At this point, Sihan spoke with Alita, guessing that they would not be attacked again, and asked her what she planned to do next. She, recovering from the shock of the events, nodded in agreement. The soldiers gradually emerged from the ground, witnessing the two walking past without being able to intervene. The wizard, unable to contain himself, muttered an expletive. He declared the mission a failure, stating they needed to retreat because their leader Xenon was down and those who were still alive should take care of the bodies of the fallen comrades. Another soldier spoke up, clarifying that none of them had actually died. They had only been buried and not even a bone was broken, leaving the wizard stunned. He could hardly believe what had happened, continuously denying that they had been defeated so thoroughly, yet none had been seriously injured or killed. He looked to the heavens, asking what in the world had just happened. Sihan and Alita, meanwhile, departed with Alita nursing an injured right arm. Sihan assured her that from this point, the pursuers wouldn't be able to follow them anymore. He silently felt relieved, thinking it would be troublesome if they were pursued further. He contemplated the greater side effects of spatial travel than he had anticipated, comparing it to when he was hailed as a savior. His current combat ability was only a tenth of what it once was, and his mana level was just a fraction. He expressed his concern about when he might regain his full strength. Alita's sudden cry of pain snapped him out of his thoughts and drew his attention. He approached her, asking if she was okay, thinking her arm might be broken. She trembled with pain but was grateful that things hadn't turned out worse than just a possible fracture. Seeing her smiling despite the pain made him internally question if gratitude for such small mercies was also something worth appreciating, and he found her to be quite an odd person. He then bandaged her arm with some simple supplies, hoping they would be of some help. She thanked him again, and he reassured her it was nothing significant. When she mentioned wanting to say goodbye and continue alone, it left him puzzled. He immediately called out, asking where she planned to go. He loudly questioned if they weren't supposed to travel together and how she intended to navigate the forest with an injured arm. She calmly suggested that she would be more careful, but he interrupted, stating that just being careful wasn't enough to solve the problem. After venting his concerns, he sighed and declared that he would help her because he felt partly responsible for her being targeted, and he couldn't leave an injured person behind. This time, it was her turn to be taken aback. She looked up, pondering for a moment, then cheerfully agreed to his company, thanking him and acknowledging his help. Sihan wondered if this really required such prolonged consideration. Embarrassed, he suggested that she drop the formalities and simply call him Sihan, which she happily agreed to. Then he asked her what she planned to do next, since she couldn't stay there anymore because her identity had been revealed. After some thought, she mentioned that the nearest settlement was Goran village, but it was likely that search teams had been sent there. Thus, she proposed crossing the mountain to head towards Kagan, a city known for its trade. In the Lilstein Kingdom's palace, a person entered to report, bowing respectfully and announcing that the search team in the Defilan Mountains had sent a message. The regent, holding a book which he then closed, acknowledged the message and asked what it was about. This person, with a youthful face, long black hair, and golden eyes, was none other than the first king of the Lilstein Kingdom, known as Lilstein I. The room was filled with neatly arranged, valuable bookshelves. Hidden behind one of these shelves was a small secret passage leading to a mysterious underground chamber, which Lilstein now entered. Raising his hand, he conjured a dangerous, eye-catching red light that activated a large, always sealed door, pushing it open. He coldly scanned the large room resembling his secret laboratory. A weak yet vital voice called out to him, bitterly cursing him. A man with golden hair, struggling and chained tightly to a solid wall, was confined there. His fierce eyes criticized the king for self-proclaiming as a hero after causing calamitous events. Lilstein smirked, guessing that the man had lived in hardship for a while, identifying him as a descendant of Lusklan. Lilstein asked him if he knew why the magical circle at his feet, originally red, had changed color. Receiving no reply, Lilstein calmly stated that the process of his mana transformation was complete. The words seemed to fall on deaf ears, as the prisoner remarked how pitiful Lilstein looked. Lilstein coldly intended for him to realize that he was the true loser. With swift, unexpected agility, before the Lusklan descendant could react, Lilstein plunged his hand into the man's chest with a sound that seemed to seize the last vestiges of life. Yet, in Lilstein's eyes, there was no pity, only a focus on the heart before him, which he deemed a disappointment for failing to solidify mana, attributing it to an inferior lineage. Sihan needed the pure bloodline of Lusklan, and the failure of his subordinate's mission, defeated by a person of ambiguous origin with identifiable features that worried Lilstein, only added to his concerns. He feared the return of Shai, yet reassured himself that Sihan could no longer travel through time, and if he did, he would have noticed. Intrigued, Sihan casually talked about the new city with Alita as they arrived. The city was familiar to him, but since it had been renamed, he couldn't recognize it. Alita was curious about this place, which Sihan mentioned had been the main base of his team. Sihan nodded, confirming that hiding here would be very easy. Turning to Alita, Sihan suddenly spoke about the gallant people. Alita, unsure of what he meant, asked if they looked like him and wondered if they were the mysterious race rumored to possess transformative magic. Sihan understood that Alita was referring to the technique of altering human facial appearances, a skill mistakenly attributed to Queen Lavina. Sihan clarified seriously that it was his technique, which he had taught to Lavina. He offered to teach Alita to demonstrate his help, but she declined, feeling they weren't that close. Sihan didn't press further and turned away to look for shelter. Stopping in front of a large hotel, Sihan smirked. Alita, curious, asked if he knew about this place. Sihan's chilling voice revealed it used to be an execution ground, piquing his interest in the surroundings and causing Alita to reassess his character. The innkeeper, showing no fondness, handed the key to Shai. Sihan was puzzled by the man's anger. After hearing from Alita that his lack of formal language was the issue, Sihan was surprised. Alita also felt it was impolite towards the elders, and Sihan, rubbing his head, realized he had unconsciously spoken informally, accustomed as he was to speaking Aston. Alita said it was too late for him to change how he spoke to her, leaving Sihan regretful for his rudeness upon their first meeting. Alita asked Sihan what his intentions were moving forward. Sihan responded that he planned to stay here to adapt, and he also invited her to join him. Alita bluntly refused, not wanting to implicate Sihan as she was a wanted person, quickly dismissing any hopes Sihan might have harbored. Sihan sighed deeply, deciding to reveal something important to Alita. He told her that if she did not accompany him, she would be captured immediately. He explained the nature of the spatial summoning shockwaves, which inevitably led to being pursued and hunted. Alita was taken aback by this revelation, realizing they had been under surveillance all this time. Sihan reassured her, saying that he had been warding off their pursuers using his magic. Alita, somewhat disbelieving and stiffened by the realization that she would need to follow Shai, then turned her voice cold and direct, asking Sihan what his reasons were for needing her company. In the capital of the kingdom of Lustenad, the knight Xenon, filled with fervor, kneels before a commander named Endarwin, pleading for another chance to clear his dishonor and capture the remaining members of Lusklan. Endarwin sighs and tells him that he doesn't need to do so, as the king wouldn't blame him if the mission fails. He reflects on Xenon's desire to return to the battlefield with untrained soldiers instead of facing a month's confinement, which gives him pause. Despite the knight's reluctance, his honor at stake, he does not want to lose it so easily. Pleased with Xenon's spirit and heroic thoughts, Endarwin cheerfully orders him to quickly restore his honor as a knight. After leaving Endarwin's office, Xenon thinks about how his targets will need money to survive and predicts they will seek freelance work to earn it. He plans to spread false information to trap his targets. Truthfully, Xenon is not interested in the descendants of Lusklan. Instead, he is intrigued by a man named Shai accompanying Alita, as Shai reminds him of someone he once knew. He vows to verify this himself. In a lavish castle, the steward bows, welcoming Lord Ted upon his return. Ted thanks the steward, Let Ward, and after observing the people of Sihan, he asks Let Ward if this is what he intended to show him. Let Ward immediately confirms, introducing Sihan and Alita as the skilled mercenaries Karagon recommended, known under the names Alita Recklin and Scene Steen. Ted, curious, inquires about the names. Sihan explains to Alita that he chose this name as it closely resembled his own, and it would be easy to overlook even if his real name were accidentally used. Ted is delighted to learn that both are masters of advanced swordsmanship, possessing various techniques ranging from seed level to beyond knight level, known for their remarkable skills and achievements. In the current world, only a few attain the level of god in swordsmanship, and Sihan is among them. However, due to space travel, his skills are temporarily lost, demoting him to a warrior level. Ted expresses his fortune in meeting them and is impressed by Sihan's achievement of reaching the warrior level at such a young age. After being dismissed by Ted, Sihan collapses onto a soft mattress, lamenting the exhausting effort of earning money. He reminisces about the easier days when he could simply pickpocket a noble, which now makes him feel even more disheartened about his current situation. Alita questions whether a hero like him had really resorted to thievery. Sihan reveals that the girl he once loved was a thief, which surprises Alita and strikes her as quite romantic. Recalling how well he and Lavina worked together, he explains to Alita that they only stole from villains. Now, Sihan just wants to earn money legally, using his sword to make a bloody spectacle. Alita, unsure what to say, reminds him that his statement sounds odd. Alita then reiterates their mission to suppress a group of tigers near Barcelian territory. She expresses concern about the difficulty of the task, noting that other skilled knight teams had also been sent and failed. She again dismisses her story as child's play, telling her of a time long ago when he and his comrades had vanquished fire wolves. But he suddenly stops and furrows his brow, pondering a scene he hadn't anticipated. Changing the subject, Sihan says this is a good opportunity for him to get started, considering the wolves manageable. Alita, still uncertain, questions if he really has lost his strength, recalling how he once defeated her with just a spoon. Sihan humorously points out that the real issue is how much weaker he has become if he now needs a spoon to win. Alita nearly bursts with frustration hearing this. Sihan consoles himself, noting that although his skills have diminished, his experience remains extensive. Not wanting to continue explaining himself in the face of Alita's endless naive questions, he ends the conversation and tells her to go to sleep. As the first rays of sunlight shine over the continent, Ted, clad in heavy iron armor with a stern face, vows to make the monsters pay for trespassing on their land. He shouts a command and all of his soldiers echo him loudly. Meanwhile, Sihan feels everything is rather dull, viewing Ted as an overzealous fool and underestimating the knight's abilities. Turning back, he checks on Alita, who assures him she is feeling better, thanks to him. Sihan felt exhilarated after she warned of a dangerous scent in the air, causing everyone to panic as hideous creatures began to appear. Ted brazenly challenged the monsters but was quickly knocked down by one of their leaps, leaving Sihan sighing in frustration. As he watched the surrounding troops try to encourage each other to maintain their fighting spirit, Sihan swung his sword and found it easier than expected to dispatch the monsters. His surprise turned to a steely resolve when he spotted the Fire Wolf pack leader, the fierce commander of the wolves. The monstrous howls caused the knights to panic and flee, Knight Ted, while maintaining the facade of a commander, shouted orders, claiming this was a great opportunity. If they could defeat the pack leader, the rest would lose their will to fight. However, his actions contradicted his words as he pushed the responsibility onto Sihan and Alita, and then excused himself to protect the soldiers, effectively fleeing the scene. Sihan, despite his disdain for such cowardice, recognized the danger he and Alita faced. Being a mercenary was tough, but confronting these monstrous creatures rekindled his excitement. Sihan declared that he would handle the monsters and keep them at bay, while Alita should take on the pack leader, which surprised her. Sihan expressed his dislike for running away as he dealt with the approaching wolf named Igneas. With relentless swings of his sword, he killed the aggressive wolf and loudly reminded Alita that it was her turn to attack the leader. Alita caught on and charged at the pack leader, who in response spewed a blast of blue flame. She dodged the attack and struck the beast, causing it to howl in anger. With a determined look, Alita aimed and slashed at the top of the beast's head. Sihan, observing from the side, was thrilled by Alita's strength, but his joy was short-lived as he suddenly paled. The monster, enraged by the strike to its head, unleashed a powerful attack directly at Alita. She couldn't react in time and took the full brunt of the assault, falling unconscious. The beast then seized her in its jaws and ran off, with Sihan screaming her name in horror. Reflecting on earlier times, Alita had once asked Sihan why he needed her. Sihan honestly explained that to avoid a long story, he was initially summoned here through a ritual that involved sacrificing a Lushan royal heart. This was why he could stay in Terranora regardless of the Emperor's wishes. This time, Sihan's arrival in the world was more akin to a summoning ritual than a heart-sacrificing contract maintained through a bond with his summoner. This meant if Alita died, Sihan would be forcibly returned to Earth. Realizing this, Sihan desperately chased after the monstrous creature that had seized the unconscious Alita in its jaws. Now drained of magical power, he struggled to keep pace, managing his dwindling energy as he ran. On Earth, Sihan had once plummeted from the sky to return to Terranora, and he was determined not to return in such a disgraceful manner again. Seizing his sword with all of his might, he unleashed the Dragon's Sword Strike, a critical hit on the monster. After the creature was defeated, he gently laid Alita down on the ground, catching his breath with a mix of relief and exhaustion. As night fell, Sihan and Alita built a small fire. She had inquired about her condition, as she had been bitten by the beast. Alita mentioned feeling sore, but believed the monsters hadn't intended to kill her. She shuddered, however, upon realizing that the Igneas wolves might practice offering living beings to their pack leader, horrified at the thought of being seen as mere food. Sihan chuckled, also noting that it was the first time he had seen an Igneas wolf use lightning, possibly a mutant, but since they had killed it, it shouldn't matter anymore. Alita, deep in thought, then asked Sihan why he had concealed his identity. She pointed out that the current 6 kingdoms were established by his allies, and he was treated like royal guest wherever he went. Sihan didn't know how to react, considering himself lucky to have escaped execution. He then confessed that after killing the Emperor, he had been betrayed by his comrades and forcibly sent back to Earth due to their betrayal, a memory vivid despite 10 years passing. He still couldn't understand why they had betrayed him, as their decision seemed premeditated and without hesitation. Sihan wondered aloud why he hadn't seen their true intentions after years together. Alita remained silent, likely shocked by being drawn into a conflict with all the kingdoms of Terranora, as Sihan contemplated her reaction. Alita's naive statement that Sihan had returned to seek revenge and thus had hidden his identity left him perplexed. He had inadvertently drawn her into a battle with the 6 kingdoms. Alita, however, remained unperturbed, stating calmly that all 6 kingdoms of Terranora were her enemies. She had been fighting for Terranora for 10 years, and since she had no choice from the beginning, she was committed to giving her all. Sihan commented on her optimistic delusion, to which Alita replied that she inherited this trait from her father, not the Mad Emperor, but her real father, Karan. Suddenly, something began approaching their location. Sihan and Alita were tense, unsure of what was approaching them. Alita even suspected it might be an enemy preparing to attack them. At that moment, a person emerged from the bushes, politely apologizing and asking to speak with them. Sihan and Alita then realized that this person was Captain Rilstein of the investigation team. Without hesitation, Alita swiftly drew her sword and struck the captain, causing him to scream in horror. Beside her, Sihan was also on guard and prepared to use his magic to knock the captain out for safety. The captain was promptly hit and sent flying, but somehow he managed to control the force of Shihan's attack mid-air, which not only startled Sihan, but also made him more wary of the captain. Filled with suspicion, Sihan questioned how the captain could have countered his skill that he had used since his youth, a skill unknown to most of his former comrades. Sihan demanded to know who the captain really was. At that moment, the captain reached into his shoulder bag and pulled something out, leaving Sihan puzzled about what he was doing. Before Sihan could finish his thought, he was taken aback. The captain, excitedly holding up a pair of blue-striped underwear, asked if they belonged to him. Sihan, seeing the captain's eager face, helplessly ordered Alita to deal with him. The terrified captain stammered a plea for surrender. In his anger, Sihan retorted why the captain was waving underwear instead of a white flag, then instructed Alita to eliminate him, promising his support. The underwear in the captain's hand bore the name Seong Sihan. The captain, still enthusiastic, displayed the underwear as if showing off and excitedly asked if Seong Sihan, the savior from another world, was indeed him, proudly claiming his correctness. Sihan, fed up with the captain's excitement, chose to ignore him. The captain recounted that this occurred 12 years ago in Varan village, where a young Sihan had used his superior skills to defeat all the invading royal troops, and the captain had been just a child then. It was later that he learned that his rescuer was none other than the hero known as the Invincible. Following his mastery of the vital energy and becoming an expert in swordsmanship, the captain eventually managed to suppress the heroic Sihan, who was radiating energy throughout his body. The more the captain spoke, the more excited he became, explaining that this was a deeply meaningful skill for Sihan, who, despite being non-lethal even to enemies. After listening to the captain's speech, Sihan suddenly realized and asked if the captain was younger than him, to which the captain affirmed he was 22 years old. Sihan inadvertently remarked that the captain looked older than his age. The captain responded immediately, recalling a saying Sihan left with him that appearances are just a cover, and what's inside is what truly matters. This hit Sihan like a sword, as he couldn't believe these were his own words from his high school days. Sihan acknowledged the captain's admiration for him. Just when it seemed the story was ending, the captain continued, expressing his admiration to the extent of owning a mini statue of Sihan, along with all books related to him such as A Memorable Hero, Crossing Two Worlds, Otherworldly Dangerous Romance, New Philosophy on the Savior from Another World, and even had paintings of Sihan. As the captain went on and on, Sihan was at a loss for words. The captain continued now about the underwear Sihan wore while defeating a mad tyrant. Finally, the captain became serious again, kneeling down and declaring that he had sworn an oath to Emperor Rilstein only because Sihan was once his comrade, but now that Sihan and the Emperor were at odds, he too would become an enemy of the Emperor. Seeing the captain's serious demeanor, Sihan couldn't bring himself to dismiss him, mainly because the captain now knew his identity. Sihan acknowledged the captain, Xenon's stride. Xenon promised to do his utmost not to disappoint Sihan. After hearing about this morning's incident with the wolf demon Igneas, Xenon suddenly remarked that such demons usually travel in pairs, thinking Sihan used the male's corpse to lure the female. This statement sent a chill through Sihan. Just then, a large and furious female Igneas wolf demon appeared behind the corpse of the male from the morning, causing all three to freeze. The large and furious female Igneas wolf appeared. Sihan was the first to react, realizing his oversight and not considering the possibility of two alpha wolves. Alita found this hard to believe, surprised that even an experienced person like Sihan could overlook such a fundamental detail. Sihan replied that it had been 10 years, and if Alita were to ask a lawyer to solve a math equation now, they might not be able to do it either, likening it to the current situation. While Alita was still puzzled by Sihan's use of the term math, Sihan explained that it was just a metaphor from Korean language. Xenon confidently interrupted. He told Sihan to let him handle the demon beast alone, promising to demonstrate his skills. Sihan hesitated but eventually agreed. As Xenon prepared to attack the demon beast, he was filled with thoughts of finally meeting the person he had admired all of his life and being granted the opportunity to prove his swordsmanship. Xenon remembered the past, specifically 2 previous occasions where he had embarrassingly found himself stuck in the ground in front of his hero. Determined to show Sihan his capabilities and regain his admiration, Xenon summoned powerful streams of energy around him. Alita was impressed by the scene, exclaiming at the remarkable display of energy, while Sihan stood aside and sighed, thinking Xenon was overdoing it. The demon beast lunged with its sharp claws towards Xenon, who skillfully blocked the attack with his sword. Xenon attacked relentlessly, each strike causing the beast to howl in pain. Alita was surprised by Xenon's level of skill, complimenting him, noting that he not only held his ground against the large beast, but also pressed it back, making her realize that Xenon had been holding back in their past encounters. Sihan, observing from the side, remarked that while Alita was very strong for her age, Xenon indeed had significant talent. He noted Xenon's skillfulness, but Alita, puzzled, asked what then would be considered a genius if that was just skillful. Sihan responded that everyone he had met before was a genius, and he was only special because he came from Earth, but the real genius was Lavina. Returning to the battle, the demon beast unleashed a flame towards Xenon, who sliced through it effortlessly, declaring that such flames could not touch him. He soared up, preparing to deliver a finishing blow. Sihan watched this familiar scene unfold. Before Xenon could finish his statement, he was struck by a lightning bolt from the demon beast and fell to the ground, reminiscent of an earlier incident involving Alita. After recovering from the fall, Xenon expressed his confusion about how the Ignis wolf could use lightning, prompting Alita to step forward. However, Sihan stopped her, insisting that he would handle it himself. The fearsome reputation of the Mad Tyrant's monster army was likely due to their strength, But the main reason was that magic was ineffective against beings from other worlds. No matter how powerful a mage was, they stood no chance against those from another world, much like Sihan, a human from Earth. Shihan had known this from his first arrival, which was why he had survived. Confidently, Shihan walked through the flames of the demon beast. However, in a twist of déjà vu, he too was struck by the beast's lightning, leaving him embarrassingly clueless about where to hide his face. Shihan was baffled by why magic was suddenly affecting him, as this had never happened before. With both embarrassment and anger, Shihan swiftly ended the demon beast with a single sword strike. After the beast fell, everyone rushed to check on Shihan, but he was still puzzled about why magic had an effect on him. Suddenly, the supposedly dead beast emitted a death rattle and gradually vanished into nothing, deepening Shihan's confusion. The next day, Sihan and Alita went to collect their reward of 600 silver coins, which seemed meager compared to their efforts but was still remarkable for a single mission. However, such high-paying missions were rare, so Shihan's dream of handling several more such tasks was dashed. Xenon then appeared with a bag containing 100 gold coins, stunning both Sihan and Alita. They repeatedly asked how Xenon managed to obtain such an amount. With tears, Xenon confessed that he had sold Shihan's boxer shorts. Alita chimed in, remarking oddly that Shihan's underwear was quite valuable, which made Shihan's hair stand on end. Xenon asked Sihan why he needed such a large sum. Sihan explained simply that it would be enough for them to travel to 3 kingdoms, although he hadn't decided where to go but would aim for the weakest one. At that moment, Sihan pulled out a gold coin from the bag, and with determination, they decided to head north to the kingdom of Jexengard. In the laboratory of the kingdom of Listine, the wizard Trandon used magic to communicate with Emperor Listine. The emperor politely greeted him, noting that they had not met in a long time. He wondered why Trandon was contacting him on a non-scheduled report day. Trandon hesitantly reported that the handling of experimental subjects numbers 11 and 12, 2 magical wolf beasts subdued by the Sihan group, might no longer require external assistance, as it seemed that the Barcellian kingdom had already dealt with it themselves. Emperor Listine calmly responded, not very surprised since numbers 11 and 12 were not particularly strong monsters. Trandon, still cautious, further added that they had lost track of that experiment. Hearing this bad news, Emperor Listine could no longer stay calm, and his face darkened with anger as he angrily rebuked Trandon for his carelessness and questioned how he dared to claim the title of head of the Ivory Tower. He mentioned the 4 magic towers of Terranora that have existed for thousands of years: the pink, white, ivory, and black towers. The first emperor of the kingdom of Lusclen, also the strongest wizard in history, had gathered all the magical knowledge and wisdom scattered throughout Terranora and divided it among these 4 towers to pass on to future generations. All magical knowledge was categorized and distributed according to different levels, depending on one's expertise to learn magic at that level. If one met the criteria, they could ascend to a higher floor to learn more advanced magic, which meant that reaching a higher tower floor was an indicator of a wizard's skill. Emperor Listine challenged Trandon whether he remembered the sole reason he was allowed to head the Ivory Tower despite lacking qualifications was because all the qualified candidates had been executed, and now he wondered if Trandon wanted to be ousted from that position, noting that there were wizards of his level on the 8th floor. Emperor Listine bluntly demanded that Trandon finalize the handling of experimental subject number 1 and erase all traces, then disconnected the connection. Fearing for his position, Trandon reluctantly accepted the demand in a panic, and after disconnecting, he could only sigh in relief, knowing he still had another chance. Meanwhile, in Rapunzel, the capital of the kingdom of Jexengard, a royal official named Squire hurriedly ran and then opened a door. Inside was Jexengard Rotenberg, the first emperor of the kingdom of Jexengard, surrounded by beautiful women. He laughed mockingly as Squire advised him that he was overly indulging in festivities and neglecting state affairs. As a man, he found nothing more enjoyable than the days when he was chased like a dream. Squire expressed his concern, fearing that the citizens would start to disdain him. The emperor arrogantly claimed that he was not a bad emperor, arguing that he spent his own money, not indulging excessively, although the funds were actually from his citizens. He continued to boast about himself, proud that he imposed only 50% of the taxes compared to the previous emperor, not 60%. He didn't burn hundreds of villages, forcing dozens into slavery. He merely punished hundreds of villages and conscripted tens of thousands into the military. Proudly, he felt he deserved a reward after overthrowing the previous tyrant emperor, reminding Squire of how brutal that emperor had been, and then criticized Squire for daring to compare him with that tyrant. Squire was about to respond, but the emperor sternly threatened that he should leave, leading Squire to reluctantly depart. Standing outside the door, Squire held his face in despair, recognizing that while the emperor was a powerful force on the battlefield during war, he lacked the qualities of a good ruler and wished someone could convince him to govern better. Returning to the emperor, his mood soured by Squire, someone suddenly pushed the door open. Duke Kalterin immediately began praising him, and the emperor was pleased to see him. As they were conversing cheerfully, the Duke handed him a stack of documents. After a quick glance, the Emperor tossed them aside, telling the Duke to handle it himself as he didn't have time for such matters, and laughed heartily, leaving the Duke powerless. In the western suburbs of Rapunzel, the capital of the kingdom of Xenon, the Sihan group stood in front of a house that could not be more dilapidated, which they had purchased. Sihan mentioned that staying at an inn for too long might draw attention, so they should consider this as a temporary base of operations. Xenon, seeing how run-down the house was, regretted not selling his current home for a better place. They entered the house, which looked even more decrepit inside than outside. Xenon shouted that the place was cursed, insisting they could not stay there. Xenon threw Sihan and Alita outside, then started cleaning the house, using his internal energy as if he were in battle to sweep through the place. After a while, the house was unbelievably clean, leaving Sihan and Alita quite surprised. Sihan was happy, seeing it as a great start. Now they had a base to prepare for dealing with Xenon. Xenon spoke about the continent of Terranora being ruled by 6 kingdoms, 2 strong, 2 medium, and 2 weak, with the strongest led by Rilstein and an Asius. Due to various reasons, there were many conflicts among the kingdoms, with the most recent being the Kargan War. This war occurred because the 2 strongest kingdoms contested for dominion, and fearing a broader war, other nations intervened violently. Sihan listened attentively to Xenon, pleased that they were still in discord. Sihan expressed his hope that their poor relations, driven by conflicting interests and losses, would persist. As they walked, Sihan affirmed that those who had expelled him would not end well. Alita appeared from nowhere. Sihan called her name, reminding her to stay calm as she too was upset that the true hero was being ostracized. Seeing Alita's distorted face, Sihan couldn't help but wonder what had caused such a grotesque change. Sihan started talking about the technique of altering one's facial appearance, instructing Alita on its use. He advised her to think of it as being powered by invisible energy and to use her own aura to stabilize it. Alita, with a scrunched face, expressed frustration to Sihan that she didn't understand despite his having explained it 3 times. Alita was annoyed because Sihan had no other way to explain. Sihan sighed and uttered a nonsensical statement that he was from Earth. He tried to help Alita imagine searching for something in a closet without being able to see, though for Sihan, it was like light illuminating his path. Sihan proudly stated that from the beginning, he had been able to use aura and magic, and his body and senses could traverse and reconfigure through dimensions. Alita crossed her arms, disbelieving what Sihan had described, concluding that it was a deception. Sihan admitted that this was the reason he could rise but couldn't explain it further, and told her to try and learn it. Alita was about to say something when suddenly an earthquake shook the ground beneath them, scattering rocks and debris everywhere. People were confused about what was happening as the falling rocks and debris caused destruction and fatalities. Amidst the chaos, a cold, glaring eye appeared behind the scenes of people scrambling for safety. A young woman running and screaming for help stumbled just as she thought she would perish under the sharp claws of a monster. Nearby, Sihan remarked, perplexed about how quickly the monster had infiltrated the area, and criticized the national system for its failure to prevent the forest beasts from descending into the town, suspecting something suspicious about the situation. Unable to just stand by, Alita struck the monster with a forceful blow. As the situation escalated, a squad of knights fully armed suddenly arrived, shouting for everyone to stop. Sihan seemed to realize something as they surrounded him. The leader of the knights shouted in a reprimanding tone that they shouldn't have stopped, indicating that this matter would be handled by the Dark Wizards. Xenon, also recognizing the severity of the situation, turned to Sihan, urgently asking what they should do next. His eyes were urgent yet resolute, as if desperate for an immediate solution, knowing any delay could lead to dire consequences. However, in response to the urgency, Sihan remained silent. His eyes, usually calm, now widened with a mix of alertness and shock, as if he had just realized something truly terrifying. His breathing became rapid as an all-too-familiar and chilling aura approached, an aura belonging to a nemesis he could never forget, someone whose mere mention stirred a simmering anger deep within him. And then, as if to confirm his worst fears, the figure of his foe appeared, poised and arrogant. Each step he took seemed to weigh heavily on the ground, immersing the atmosphere in an uncomfortable chill. As expected, he stopped and spoke in a steady, deep voice filled with challenge and mockery. His words, sharp as thorns, pierced deeply into the minds of those listening. He emphasized each word coldly, making the already suffocating atmosphere even more oppressive. He spoke, or rather accused with disdain and a sense of filth, about how the lowly beasts had dared harm his subjects, as if their actions were a direct insult to the unshakable authority he proudly held. Xenon shouted, ordering the Black Knights to protect the civilians, while he would deal with those detestable enemies. Sihan recognized him as soon as he approached. The Black Knights unanimously responded to his command. Exhausted, Xenon saw this as an opportunity to stretch his muscles against these monsters. Wielding 2 large maces, he swung at the fierce wolves, causing the surrounding villagers to cover their mouths in amazement, seeing him as a hero. His eyes seemed to emit walls of fire, and each of his strikes seemed aimed at taking the wolves' lives. In his view, these seemingly fierce wolves looked merely pathetic, and sensing the danger, they fled from Jexengard's imposing presence. Watching the beasts tuck their tails and run, Jexengard cursed, determined not to let the monsters escape. Using his strength, a circle of strong golden light radiated from beneath his feet. Xenon, standing to the side, was agape upon realizing that this was a Babel seal, which he was seeing for the first time. Curious, Alita asked about it, and Xenon explained that only a master swordsman of transcendental skill could use it. Jexengard clenched his fist and yelled, preparing to strike the monsters. A loud explosion followed, and the villagers cheered for him. Xenon and Alita were impressed by his strength, while Sihan, standing nearby, remained silent, internally cursing Jexengard as a scoundrel for fabricating the monster affair to gain the villagers' trust, which he viewed as an easy way to win their confidence. Sihan mockingly thought of Jexengard as lowering himself to gain fame due to his shaky self-belief. The villagers continuously praised Jexengard as a great hero who had saved over 100 of them. Looking at his brightly smiling face, Sihan kept cursing him as a fool and wondered if perhaps his subordinates had orchestrated this plan to curry favor with the king. In Shihan's eyes, he was still as foolish as ever. Lost in these thoughts, suddenly, Jexengard's gaze swept toward him, making Sihan inwardly curse in alarm. Jexengard looked at Sihan with a calculating gaze, not treating him as an ordinary person. A soldier then came forward, diverting Jexengard's attention by inviting him back to the castle. Sihan breathed a sigh of relief, thinking he was no longer in trouble. Although he knew Jexengard was a fool, he couldn't deny that his physique was impressively strong and robust. Sihan thought to himself that he must act cautiously to avoid bringing disaster upon himself. It had been 10 days since Sihan's group arrived in Latinsel. Alita had enrolled in a basic class of variable energy and had shown impressive results. Xenon had learned more about mountain-breaking techniques from Sihan. While they were training and waiting for the right moment in the region of Berselt, heretics were controlling monsters that were destabilizing the world, and posters recruiting heroes were everywhere. Xenon explained to Sihan that the heretics were actually a space tribe during the reign of the Mad Emperor, and in many areas of Terranora, various heretic groups that worshipped the god Horus dominated. Xenon heard that they had been conquered by Lusklin, but had recently regrouped using new doctrines to entice people. When Xenon mentioned that they were referred to as the reborn Sihan forced a smile, almost as if he wanted to disappear. After asking Xenon again to make sure he hadn't misheard, Xenon clarified that the otherworldly Sung Sihan was actually the son of Horus, brought to Terranora to punish the sinful world, and Sung Sihan intended to take the people of Terranora to Earth, but he was stopped by the 6 heroes and had to return. Sihan, his head full of dark thoughts, suddenly spoke up, seeing this as an opportunity. He turned to Alita and Xenon, and said that conquering the heretics was the king's mission, but Jexengard would likely delegate this task to the exploration team. This would be their chance to join the team and leave the capital while the guard numbers were reduced, and they would have a reason to approach Jexengard. Earl Kelt Aaron ordered everyone to line up. He had been appointed by Jexengard as the commander of the main squad. He hoped everyone would perform well under his command and earn rewards. Sihan was somewhat confused, thinking they would still be in trouble, but he believed that if they performed well, they would still have a chance to meet Jexengard. Kelt Aaron, sitting on his horse, reminisced about how he had tiredly begged Jexengard and then thanked the heavens when he was chosen to lead the exploration team. He lamented getting involved in this mess and remembered that the secret of the ivory tower depended on this and must never reach Jexengard's ears, as it would cause trouble. Kelt Aaron felt that the matter wasn't too difficult. Lam Trandon began to share his plan with Aaron, who had been pondering until now. Aaron knew that if he could resolve his debt with the ivory tower, this would not be an issue. He shouted, ordering everyone to follow his directions, and they began their journey. A group of fanatic followers stood before the entrance to a large cave. Lakran, the leader of this group, was manipulating the others with his words. The heretics finally raised their swords of sin. He also blamed those who opposed their faith, claiming they were trying to rob the believers with their armies. Lakran yelled loudly, telling the foolish unbelievers that death was a liberation and a path to freedom, so the loyal followers need not fear. His absurd, unreasonable words manipulatively turned the sacrifice of their precious lives into something seemingly noble, resonating powerfully with the knave followers. Lakran added, according to the teachings of Horus, death was the only way to be freed from this fake world, but Horus did not want us to die by selfish means like suicide, to achieve freedom for ourselves. He could not contain his excitement, saying that the death they achieved by liberating others is the joy they could offer to their God, becoming even more exhilarated and calling those who had been chosen to experience this suffering to step forward. 3 cloaked figures stepped up, 2 men and a woman. Lakran approached and reassured the only woman, telling her she need not fear, as she would be blessed with the love of Horus. The woman, now soulless in her gaze, obediently followed him. Please, Lakran loudly called out to something, Dragon of Horus, please accept the offering of these loyal believers. No sooner had he finished speaking than a terrifying roar sounded, and a giant dragon emerged from the cave. The fearsome dragon did not scare the sacrificial victims, but instead excited them further, and they continuously praised the dragon. Suddenly, the dragon lunged forward and devoured them in one bite, leaving nothing behind. The remaining followers excitedly shouted that the Lord's messenger had accepted the sacrifice and pleaded for the unfaithful to receive the fire of truth. Lecrain was secretly delighted because this sacrifice had been successful. Holding the ashes of the Luskland royalty, he planned to continue the sacrifices, believing the Earth Dragon would comply with his wishes. Unsure of how long he could control the Earth Dragon, but knowing that without it the followers would not obey, Lecrain was indifferent. When the time came, he would deny everything, but for now he intended to enjoy the situation. Meanwhile, Sihan, Alta, and Xenon were taking a break with a group that Xenon described as utterly disorganized, more chaotic mess than anything resembling a structured army. Alita countered, arguing that no organization in the exploration team established by mercenaries would exist, and a self-important knight like Xenon wouldn't understand how lowly mercenaries operate. Xenon, stung by the phrase self-important knight, began to retaliate, escalating the tension between them until Sihan intervened to mediate. Hungry, Sihan suggested they all go eat. Xenon's eyes lit up, and he eagerly said he would prepare the meal immediately. While Xenon busied himself with cooking, Sihan and Alita chatted on the side. Sihan complained about having to eat stew again, but Alita explained that ensuring nutritional intake during travel was crucial, so they were limited to stews because they were quick and didn't waste ingredients. Sihan was still not satisfied, wishing for a different dish. Just in time, Xenon finished cooking, and his stew shone with a golden hue, appearing delicious. Sihan couldn't help but compliment him, even suggesting Xenon might have used different ingredients. They continued to eat voraciously, enjoying the meal until it began to rain. Sihan, while setting up the shelter, noted that the rain would make it harder to perceive their surroundings, complicating the differentiation of things around them when immersed in water vapor. Alita believed they didn't need to worry since the strength of the Sihan Reborn cult came from monsters who would likely not ambush them in the rain. Assuming monsters would not roam in wet conditions. Sihan warned they shouldn't be complacent. If the enemy's forces included monsters, they might force the monsters out despite the rain. Countering his own argument, Sihan reasoned that even if they were adept at controlling minds, the enemy couldn't control a monster's instincts, so the creatures wouldn't move about in such weather. As soon as Sihan finished speaking, someone screamed a warning about monsters approaching, leaving Sihan speechless and thinking that Terranora must have changed over the past 10 years. A group of dozens of monsters advanced toward them. Initially, the mercenaries were confident in their abilities, but after only managing to kill one monster, another severely beat them, and as more monsters continued to arrive, the mercenaries considered fleeing. Remaining calm, Sihan assessed the situation and instructed them to focus on killing the monsters one at a time, advising them to ignore the overwhelming number and concentrate solely on the monster directly in front of them. Following his guidance, the mercenaries were able to attack more effectively. The leaders of the mercenaries in the tent took notice of Sihan. Jildarin, one of them, saw potential in Sihan's abilities and thought he might be useful for his own schemes. Sihan swung his sword fiercely, decapitating the monster as blood spurted out in layers. The soldiers, appearing exhausted, wondered among themselves if this was the last monster. As the creature fell, the team cheered their victory. Sihan, however, did not join the celebration and instead stood aside, tallying a total of 44 monsters, none of which had attempted to flee. He was suspicious about this and was surprised to learn that magic could be used to control the monsters against their nature, witnessing this capability for the first time. His gaze turned cold as he glanced sideways. In the distance, at a tent, there was a heated argument. Sihan assessed the situation, guessing that this was not just a simple mission to suppress a sect. Terran commanded everyone to remain highly vigilant, warning that anyone caught dozing off would be punished. Some soldiers, overhearing him, disagreed vehemently and cursed under their breath, disdainful of him who had stayed behind the knights fighting the monster earlier. Another menacing-looking figure also lamented, secretly blaming the Black Mage team for not assisting them from the start, leaving them battered and bruised. Xenon lamented that Terran was indeed a pitiful man, and Alita agreed, pointing out his self-centeredness. Sihan seemed largely indifferent, simply picking up items into his bag as if it was an everyday occurrence. Xenon curiously asked if Sihan knew Terran. Sihan didn't deny it, but mostly knew him through rumors, famously referred to as a superhuman with the temperament of a sage and the brain of a monster. Xenon pondered the nickname, questioning why it wasn't the other way around. Sihan nonchalantly agreed, remarking that he was indeed terribly incompetent and lacked any real skills, surprised that he could even rise to the rank of a count. Listening to Sihan, Alita looked at him for a long time, commenting that she didn't think someone as incompetent as he could have climbed to such a position. In the village of Zod, Tarion encouraged the weary soldiers, advising them to rest and regain their strength. Xenon was delighted that they would sleep well tonight, not in flimsy tents. Seeing everyone's happiness, Sihan couldn't help but think that such treatment would make them forget the hardships of the previous day. Lying in bed, Sihan mused about having a great sleep, but a calling voice almost petrified him. Raising his hand to make the girl calling his name recognize him, she seemed surprised and then approached, cheerfully introducing herself as Dina Crumble, serving beside the Black Knight Ferriman. Dina came to invite the 3 members of Sihan's group to join her because the wizard Habark and Mr. Jordan were looking for them. Leading them to a large inn, Dina mentioned it was their lodging and explained that due to the confidential nature of the meeting, she would not proceed further. Her eyes brightened as she admired Alita, envying her high rank at such a young age. Sihan pushed the door open and loudly inquired who was looking for them. The man named Jordan turned around to welcome them. Habark, sitting next to him, also introduced himself. Jordan showed them a medium-sized map stating it depicted the sect's base, half a day's journey from their current location. Habark directly addressed the issue of people from the Sihan sect, knowing how to control monsters, suspecting they knew as well. Xenon nodded in affirmation. Suddenly, Habark looked at the 3 members of Sihan's group in front of him and asked if they were discreet. Sihan displayed a mercenary attitude, saying it depended on the amount of money involved. Habark, seemingly amused, threw some shiny gold coins on the table, asking if that settled matters. Xenon was dazzled by the sight, while Sihan's face darkened as he thought about his underwear that cost 100 gold coins. After sealing the deal, Habark revealed that the Sihan sect's claimed ability to control monsters was false, as they were a human-sacrificing sect using magical power. Sihan asked Habark if controlling monsters was a new type of magic, but Habark shook his head. According to him, it was one of the secrets of the Ivory Tower, and involved a powerful high-ranking sorcerer named Lacran Flawed who, due to an oversight, allowed the monsters he was experimenting on to escape, costing him his privileges and subjecting him to a 4-element punishment. Xenon was shocked to hear that it was a death sentence. Seeing Xenon's outburst, Habark quickly reminded him to be quiet, causing him to profusely apologize. Habark instructed Xenon to just listen silently as he continued the story of how Lacran had miraculously escaped and caused severe consequences. Those consequences included him stealing an experimental creature capable of controlling other monsters. Sihan was somewhat taken aback, and Habark continued that they had also discovered Lacran's parents were members of the Sihan sect, and he had taken the monster to expand the sect's influence. Therefore, defeating the monsters and erasing traces of the Ivory Tower was the true mission of their journey. Jordan said they had summoned Sihan's group here hoping for cooperation. Sihan expressed his honor and jokingly remarked that if that was the case, even slaying a dragon wouldn't be a problem. However, Habark's affirming snap made him stiffen. Indeed, they would have to defeat a dragon named Drake, the Earth Dragon. While washing their clothes by a stream and chatting, it became clear that their suppression team's target was the Earth Dragon, which explained why they were paid 10 gold coins. According to Sihan, given their current state, the Earth Dragon wouldn't pose much of a challenge to them. Xenon still didn't understand why a master swordsman and a wizard were requested to suppress a heretical group, wondering if it would be better to refuse. Sihan explained that it would not be safer to refuse as they could face danger since they had learned the secrets of the Ivory Tower. The others might even kill them to silence them, so that no one else would know these secrets. Xenon and Alita were stunned by this, and Sihan thought to himself that perhaps they had never considered this, which wasn't surprising in this era of peace. They were too naive, and it was unfortunate that this was the reality. Alita unexpectedly objected, suggesting it might be alright because Xenon had pretended to ask what the secret of the Ivory Tower was. If they intended to kill them, it would have directly informed them. She argued that explaining the incident in detail indicated that they wanted them to keep the secret, hence why they had proactively shared all the relevant information beforehand. Xenon agreed with Alita, making Sihan feel somewhat embarrassed, but he quickly regained his confidence, not realizing how valuable the information could be as excellent bait, which he could use to approach Jexengard. As the Sihan group continued to happily wash their clothes by the stream, a group of women from the village approached with their laundry tubs. The women struck up a conversation with the Sihan group, commenting that it must be inconvenient for them in such a remote village, but it was still a decent place to rest before moving on. The Sihan group responded cheerfully and then packed up to leave. As soon as the Sihan group turned their backs, the women's demeanor changed instantly. Suddenly, one of the women pulled out a knife and lunged at the Sihan group. Alita, sensing something amiss, kicked the woman, causing her to fall over. The other women, each holding a knife, murmured about their ambush failing, incredulously noting that the Sihan group had caught on quickly and pitying them as poor, untrustworthy fools. Sihan only then realized that they were dealing with a group of fanatics, and he was surprised that Alita had anticipated and dodged the ambush. Alita mentioned that she didn't specifically know, but she was always on alert when approached by strangers. The women continued muttering, claiming they were tired of living and that death would be a relief, believing that only true believers would ascend to heaven. And as they spoke, they charged at the group. Alita shouted a warning to be careful as there was something different about their eyes. Within 10 seconds, they had dealt with the attackers. Aaliyah was disappointed, noting that the only difference was their eye color. Sihan commented that she seemed to think everyone could go mad, pointing out that only warriors typically go berserk, and these were just deranged old women. However, Sihan was puzzled as to why they were attacked since they were not key members of the suppression force. At that moment, Xenon pointed out the fire that was erupting violently nearby. Sihan reacted first, realizing that the fanatics were not just trailing them, but had also followed the entire group. There was no more time for relaxation and laundry. If the fanatics were capable of this, it meant the entire village was now a stronghold for the heretical sect. In the village, the locals had gone berserk, determined to see the Sihan sect on their way to heaven, while the unbelievers would descend to hell, proclaiming that death was the true liberation and chanting for the long life of the Sihan sect. The leader of the suppression force was fighting desperately to quell the uprising. A monstrous buffalo-like beast charged at him, and he had to shield himself while using his power to protect himself. Another leader flew in to handle the demonic beast, saving him. According to intelligence, the Earth Dragon's controls spanned the entire mountain range, indicating that the dragon was 500 years old, which they were fundamentally unable to handle. The person reporting then corrected himself, stating the Earth Dragon was only 100 years old, but its ability to control minds had been enhanced through experiments, making it as formidable as a 500-year-old dragon. The reporter continued, explaining that although the control ability had increased more than they anticipated, its combat abilities, mana, and physical strength were as they had predicted. The monsters were advancing straight toward a tavern, with one beastly creature smashing through the door with a single blow. As Count Keltarin trembled in fear, unsure of what to do, his guards struggled to fend off the monstrous beast. At that critical moment, the Sihan group arrived and swiftly intervened, easily dispatching the beast and all others that threatened them. The leader of the suppression force expressed relief and gratitude when Sihan appeared. He instructed Sihan to protect the terrified Count while they dealt with the remaining demonic creatures, a task Sihan felt somewhat disgruntled about. Suddenly, Sihan sensed something approaching, a looming presence that heightened the tension. It was then that the Earth Dragon, the very creature at the center of their mission, made its dramatic entrance. The beautiful houses are no longer visible in their original form, sadly consumed by the fierce red flames. Jordan is battling a large monster, which is nearly defeated. He turns back, shouting as if to boost everyone's morale. Terran sighs, certain that the Black Knight will eliminate the monsters. Sihan gazes into the distance, contemplative about the number of beasts slain. The sound of fleeing beasts startles them, seemingly indicating that things are well, but from afar, the silhouette of a large dragon approaches. No one knows how it appeared there, only that it brings an immense terror. The warriors try to calm each other, reminding themselves they still have a wizard by their side. The fierce dragon spews a stream of glowing red lava as if to engulf everything, under which flames dance like an army and wizards struggle with a weak magical water barrier. A knight, dripping with sweat, calls for everyone to advance since everything is within expectations, especially with wizards to aid them. Jordan, grim-faced, acts as though his plan is ruined, believing that predicting the Earth Dragon's power is futile. Habart casually comments to Jordan that the potential to control the Earth Dragon's mind is far off, yet Jordan disagrees. Cursing, he then grabs his sword, reinvigorated with a knight's zeal to continue the fight since things have already happened. Jordan approaches the Earth Dragon, his figure completely overshadowed by the massive beast. He initiates a powerful attack, slashing towards the dragon, admired by the other knights. Xenon also seems impressed, explaining to Sihan next to him that it is the special move of the Black Knight team. Looking at the scene, Sihan reflects on his past battles at Jexengard, filled with youthful impulsiveness and his own helplessness. Sihan shouts to his companions to join the battle, as the Black Knights cannot win alone. Hearing this, Terran cries out in despair, unwilling to agree as he wants them to protect him. Sihan frowns, warning him of the consequences if the Black Knights fall, but Terran, seemingly deaf, stubbornly insists they escort him away. Xenon and Alita display a look of disdain when they hear Terran wants to abandon his teammates. Sihan is both annoyed and troubled by Terran's incessant complaints, deciding with the approval of his two friends to defeat Terran. However, before they can act, Terran realizes their intent, darkening their expressions. It seems he might drag them away, but suddenly, Terran collapses awkwardly as if malfunctioning. Unaware of what's happening, Dina approaches cheerfully from a distance, claiming that defeating Terran is an achievement, and her stick is her sword. Sihan sincerely praises Dina. Jordan and the others continue to struggle in battle, the Black Knight breathing heavily, nearly unable to resist. A shout from behind tells Livell to move aside. In the blink of an eye, the giant claw of the Earth Dragon smashes into the ground, devastating the area. Jordan anxiously watches Livell being flung away under the hungry gaze of the Earth Dragon. Luckily, Sihan and two others quickly intervene, both attacking and defending, pulling Livell out of danger. Sihan lands, standing next to Jordan, announcing their arrival to help and mentioning that Earl Terran has fainted by accident. Hearing Alita's cry of pain, Sihan quickly turns to inquire. Alita says it's nothing serious. She just didn't expect the Earth Dragon's body to be so hard, causing her minor injuries. Sihan looks at the Earth Dragon, certain that ordinary attacks don't harm it, and if they want to damage it, they must remove its scales. But before he can direct everyone's actions, Sihan is shocked to see the dragon's strange reaction. It suddenly freezes and then flees, leaving everyone bewildered. Alita, not missing a beat, jests with Sihan that maybe the dragon has a cleanliness disorder and hates getting blood on it. The persecution of the cultists has reached its climax, with Shihan's followers being tied up and continuously cursing others. They stubbornly claim that Saint Sihan will save them amidst the harsh words of the guards. Sihan observes everything settling down as if it's all over, and Alita remarks on the effectiveness of the ambush. They are relieved that Terran remembers nothing. Alita questions whether the persecution of the cult is ending and perhaps the leaders have now fled. Sihan comforts Alita, assuring her that things are still progressing well and successfully, reminding her that this was not originally a persecution. He raises suspicions about the escape of the Earth Dragon and Lakran. In the pitch-dark cave, Lakran is infuriated upon discovering that the Earth Dragon no longer obeys him. He tries to awaken the dragon, but to no avail. Suspicious of what might have happened 4 days ago, his eyes turn icy as he curses the other wizards for killing someone over a mere mistake. Lakran desperately needs the monster, thinking that with the dragon's power he could easily crush the army outside, not only deceiving the ivory tower, but also escaping to live luxuriously in the reborn Sihan church. Lakran shouts until he is hoarse, spreading the heart powder in his hand as a lure to awaken the Earth Dragon. He commands the dragon to destroy the army outside. The dragon's sharp, cold eyes open, and at the same time, Lakran senses something amiss. The flames ignite the heart powder, causing it to burst into flames. He quickly tosses the burning powder from his hand, cursing loudly. But before he can recover, the Earth Dragon, now awakened and fierce with the power of impending death, looms over him, and Lakran realizes that his magic to control the dragon's mind has been destroyed. He tries to calm the Earth Dragon with his dwindling strength, but it seems the beast's predatory instincts overpower any remaining tame qualities, and Lakran's weak and painful cry escapes his throat, followed by streams of bright blood. From a distance, Jordan observes the cave, noting its eerie quietness, contrary to his expectation of encountering many monsters. He asks Habark if there are any more monsters they can control, noting they have already killed hundreds in the past few days. Habark sighs, relieved at the news, but then frowns as he notices something. As he looks more closely, his expression darkens and he quickly pulls Jordan down beside him, curious upon noticing the appearance of Earl Tarrion. The two whisper about the existence of the Earth Dragon and Lakran being a secret, and whether Earl Tarrion would deal with the heretics. Jordan speaks in a lowered voice, also puzzled why Tarrion is there. Suddenly, on the other side, Tarrion shouts in dissatisfaction, knowing that his guard comprises only one Black Knight and 2 wizards. Stubbornly, he stands there harshly demanding more people. Jordan, feeling powerless, tries to explain the situation to Tarrion, but Tarrion has no faith in what Jordan is saying. Faced with Tarrion's attitude, Jordan, provoked, yells at him and suggests that if Tarrion cannot accept the situation, he should come along with him. Surprisingly, this proposal makes Tarrion immediately agree. However, as if suddenly realizing something, Tarrion shows a confused expression that even stops Jordan in his tracks. After pondering which side is stronger, Tarrion decisively decides to join Jordan, adding to Jordan's frustration as he now finds Tarrion completely troublesome. Tarrion questions Jordan if he is sure that the Earth Dragon and Lakran are inside. Jordan is certain as he has used a mind-opening technique. Sihan, following behind and overhearing Jordan, reflects on his own experiences with the mind-opening technique and wonders what the black powder that causes others to reveal everything might be. Suddenly, a roar from the cave shakes the earth, recognized by the knights as the Earth Dragon. Everyone immediately readies for battle. Jordan is taken aback by the overwhelming presence of the dragon, unsure if this is the same Earth Dragon he has encountered before. Facing the massive beast, Jordan smirks, underestimating the situation, thinking it wouldn't be a big deal to let the Earth Dragon experience his power. Habark, also serious, prepares his magic, relieved that his powers have been restored. From his hands, a stream of gentle frostlight aims to teach the Earth Dragon a lesson. The surrounding wizards deploy their powers, targeting the Earth Dragon. Xenon observes the perfect coordination of knightly defense and wizard attack, so perfect that Sihan thinks they might not need to intervene. However, things go beyond their expectations as the wizards in the front scream in horror when their magic suddenly disappears, overpowered by a superior force from another realm. The Earth Dragon fiercely breathes out flames, and the wizards and knights who can't escape fast enough are hit by the devastating blow, screaming in agony. Jordan is stunned to see his teammates overcome, confused about what is happening. Tarrion can only stand aside, yelling like a weakling. Sihan feels the intense heat, surprised that the Earth Dragon can resist magic like a fire wolf. Glancing at the fallen wizards and the struggling knights, he realizes that if this continues, they will all perish. With no other choice, risking exposure of his true identity, Sihan decides to intervene and save the others.